that we can see things in it. Genesis, the book, is known mostly as the book of the beginnings. It's the first book of the Bible. It's the beginning of a whole lot of things. The beginning of the whole universe, the beginning of the earth, all that's covered in the first couple of chapters. The beginning of mankind, the beginning of marriage, the beginning of family, the beginning of the Sabbath being established by God whenever He rested on the seventh day. The first mentions of sacrifice, and even in chapter 3, the foretellings of the gospel that we find, the first mentions also of how that government was established. So it honestly and definitely is a book of beginnings. But as we look at the precepts, as we look at the things that carry on even into today, and we look into chapters 10, 11, and 12, and we're going to reference a whole lot of the New Testament too, where that we know that we have one book here. So whenever we look at it with an eye of faith, it's not just about beginnings, but it's also about blessings, about the way that God has always been the same, and about how that He deals with His people, and about how that He always blesses. So He's a covenant God. He made a covenant with Adam. He made a covenant with Noah. And as we finish with Noah and we move on today and his accomplishments, we are shown what life looked like beyond that great flood that took place with Noah and the way that he believed in God. Chapters 10 and 11 shows us the importance of Noah's sons, about what happened after the flood. They were charged with being fruitful, multiplying, and replenishing the earth. And in chapter 10, we get the names of all those who did just that, and the generations that followed, and the sons of Noah. And as I look at chapter 10, and I was praying about what to bring today, and I was asking God, the thing that I look at chapter 10, it definitely shows that lineage, and it shows how that the bloodline passed down, and it shows where that the bloodline that we serve, we know where the bloodline of Jesus, we can trace it all the way back. But as I was looking at chapter 10, there was something that I noticed about it. There's not a whole lot to preach in it, other than I'm going to tell you, go read it if you have a lot of time on your hands and you want to try to learn how to pronounce difficult names. Chapter 10 is full of those. It's also a chapter, I don't know if you guys saw on Facebook or not, but Jonah and Sydney finally made the announcement I've been dying to say. There's a grandbaby on the way. But I hope and pray they don't look for names in chapter 10. So as we look at chapter 10 and we see that those nations that came on and how that they passed on, and we see that those three sons of Noah, about how that it all came from them. But chapter 11 is about the scattering of those nations. When the people start to build a city and a tower, they're trying to make a monument, they're trying to make their relationship with God about human achievement. We actually find in chapter 11 the first real attempt for us to try to please God with our actions, try to earn God's favor, to try to prove to God that we are so smart. So God comes down. We're talking about the Tower of Babel that's found in chapter 11. Confuses the language of all the people so they can't communicate with each other. And then in verse 10 of chapter 11, I know I'm moving pretty quick, but again, these are the things that kind of happen in those. In verse 10 of chapter 11, we start to see the last of Noah's three sons, which is Shem, the generations of Shem. We got Ham, Japheth, and Shem. Again, these are not typical names, and I don't encourage anybody to name their kids after these people. Shem was 100 years old and begat. Our fact said 2 years after. See what I'm telling you? You don't want to try to say these names. But what we do take from chapters 10 and 11 is about how that God has always been in control, about how that God always has a way of dealing with people, and that we have a choice of how we deal with Him. You see, God is very matter of fact. God is. Matter of fact, what He says is, I am. That's one of the things. Who should I tell Him has sent me? You remember that? I am. I am. I just am. Now, your response to that I am tells us a whole lot about our lives and how we choose to live it. Shem was the youngest son, and through him God chose this line, the line that led none other than to our Faith Hall of Fame main character today, Abram. The first 11 chapters of the Bible cover nearly 2,000 years historically. But then the next 39 chapters only cover 350 years. So what are you saying? What I'm telling you is that the first 11 chapters are kind of in that fast-forward motion. There's a whole lot that's happening and not a whole lot of words about it. But whenever you hit the end of chapter 11 and you get into chapter 12 and we are introduced to this exalted father known as Abram, that's what his name meant. And then you go to the next 39 chapters. It only covers Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, those central figures and the things that happened in and around them. And it only covered about 350 years. If you were going to write a book about your life, you wouldn't try to write the book as a diary, just detailing the events of the day. If you were writing a book about your life, or if you've ever read any good book at all, you know that the most important parts are what's focused on, the thing that really affects things, the things that really matters. And you might say, well, I would be really interested in what happened at the Tower of Babel. I'd really be interested because it kind of looks like today, well, God didn't give it much attention. That should tell us something about the things and the pursuits and all the stuff that we see happening, all of the advances in technology and all the accomplishments of mankind. In the eyes of God, it's not real impressive. In the eyes of God, it's just something that He has to deal with and knock aside so He can focus on what really matters. And what really matters is our heart. What really matters is the way that we realize that we are temporary, but He is eternal. And if we have any hope of eternal life, it's in Him, not of us. So as we look at this and we see how that the Bible goes, it really says something just in how it's written. So as we look at chapter 11 running through about chapter 25, the happenings and the events surrounding the first of those four pillars of the Bible, Abram. And Abram is known as the father of faith. The father of faith. And faith in this context means those who believe. You know, Father Abraham, did you sing that song when you were in school? Father Abraham had many sons, and many sons had... That's because there were so many people that came from Abraham. You know, it's amazing how that all these things came. He was known as exalted father, but we find in those first few verses about him that he was given a wife named Sarai who was barren. So just like Noah spent 120 years of his life building a boat that people didn't understand, Abram lived the first 90 years of his life, 100 years of his life, living with a name that didn't make any sense because he didn't have any children. God has given me this name. God has given me this title. I am known as exalted father, but I have no children. Faith, the father of faith, a heritage, a line, a way of living. The spiritual heritage of Abraham has affected and caused all kinds of things to happen in the whole world, even organized religion. The spiritual heritage of Judaism, of Islam, and Christianity find their beginnings in this line that we're looking at today. Abram was a central and very, very important figure in the Bible. And all three of those religions look to him and they love him very, very much. He's a very influential guy. In Romans 4, Paul says this, that Abraham believed God and it was accounted unto him as righteousness, or credited unto him as righteousness. This is the first mention of what we know as the biblical concept of justification. How can I make myself just? How can I fix this great gap? How can I fix this thing? I am sinful, but God is good. I know about God. I've heard about God. I know that He's real. I've even felt God. But how in the world can I live a life where I'm not just a hypocrite every day that I live? And I watch people struggle with that, and I struggle with that too. And I look at my life and I see the things that I think about the things that I do. I think about the choices that I make, and I think, man, I'm a hypocrite of all hypocrites. Thank God it's not dependent on what we do, what we think. Thank God it's not dependent on that. But it's dependent as we are justified. It gets accounted unto us through and by something. The Bible teaches us this. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. Now, we have a new covenant. We're not living under the same covenant that came to Noah and Abraham. We have a new covenant through and by one man, Jesus. We have faith in one man. His name is Jesus Christ. It's not based on how well I do. It's not based on how well I perform. It's not based on how many pure thoughts I have. It's not based on how many good choices I make. It's all based on the fact that it was done before I was ever thought about. He was hanging on a tree and resurrected from the grave before I was ever made in my mother's womb. All of that covenant that was made. What's my job? To have faith in that, to believe what God says. And as we look at this example, Noah, and now we have Abraham, we find that they are the first examples of that they believed God, and because of that, it was accounted unto them. There was some fine accounting that was done. Whenever you guys do your taxes, there's some fine accounting that gets done, right? You really take your time. You really figure out those taxes, right? Well, this is a much more complicated problem than just trying to figure out how much we want to pay the government. This is a problem where we're trying to figure out, how can I account myself? How can I really lay my head down at night and feel like I am right with God? Well, the first thing you got to know is you got to quit worrying about what you're doing so much, and you got to remember and you got to think about what God has already done. This is how it gets accounted unto you. This is how you get counted unto righteousness. Not about our dead works. It's about our hearts. It's about what we believe. It's about what we choose to do with our lives according to the heart posture that we have. We cannot earn it. We don't earn it. We don't work it out. It is accounted. God works out the hardest accounting issue in the world. What is that hardest issue? How can someone like you and me have a chance of eternal life? This is our first mention of this, and it's so exciting to get to this point in the Bible where we can actually start to see things that we look at and we say, man, I can really relate to this. So what other way could there be other than the way that God accounts righteousness unto us? I'm glad you asked, because those three religions that I mentioned a minute ago, they have a big deal in this whole world if you look about it. And so as you think about it, one other way that it's tried to measure up, that we try to account ourselves so that we can measure up to God, well, Judaism, the law. Here's the issue with the law, though. It was given to God's chosen people because they asked for it, but also ultimately to direct them back to God. Why did God give them what they asked for? Because He knew when He gave it that whenever they actually tried to use it, that it would become a tool that would show them, I can't do it. I actually can't do it. I want to do it. I need to do it. I would like to do it, but I just can't do it. How many of you guys have ever tried to please God? You get up in the mornings and you say, today I'm going to be perfect. How long does it take before you realize, I can't do that? This is what the law continually tells us. Paul said it this way, I would have not known I was a sinner had it not been for the law. So this is some of the other accounting that we try to do. This is how I'm going to become righteous with God. I'm just going to be perfect according to the law. That doesn't work. The law is good. It's very important to study it. It's very important to know it. And we're going to do that over the next several months, I'm sure, as we continue on in the Old Testament. But as I look at that and I think about this, Hebrews 11:6 comes to mind. Without faith, it is impossible to please God. So it's not about how religious we are. It's not about how perfect we are. It's not about what others before us have done. It's not about what our dads and our moms and our brothers and our sisters. I mean, if they have faith, that is a great thing. Lots of times I talk to people and I say, hey, do you know God? Hey, tell me about your relationship with Jesus. Tell me about your response to the gospel. Oh, well, my dad's a preacher. So? My grandpa built that church around the corner. Okay. It's not what I asked. Sometimes I think that whenever we look at what else could be accounted, what other accounting can I depend on? What other spiritual CPA is there that I'm going to depend on? You go to the law, and you're going to find that it's all about your performance. You're going to find that it's all about how that you do. It's about being born into a system. It's about being born into something. It's about being told. It's about something being pushed onto you that you didn't even choose. Both of those other religions, Judaism and Islam, are something that you are born into. But a real life, a real heart that is surrendered to God, you cannot be born into it. You must be born again. Born again, not just how that you are just pronounced, not just that somebody says 1, 2, 3, repeat after me. Now I call you this. Oh, I see what your last name is. That must mean that you are good to go. No, it's not how it is at all. It's about the heart. It's about what you have done in response to hearing what God has done. And as we look at Abraham, as we start to see what he has done, he is known as the father of faith. We see the other things that this world tries to do. Just 3 of them that we're mentioning today. We're going to talk about the heart of Christianity, which is what we're looking at whenever we see how that Abram lived, and we see how that it has been passed on through this lineage all the way down through Jesus and into us. from the line of Noah. We can look at that. But then we also we say, well, what about Islam? You've already talked about how that Judaism makes it about the law. Well, Islam is even more law-based, even more rules-based, even more about what you do, even more about how well you follow after the Quran and the teachings of its leader. Well, yeah, but they got the first 5 books of the Bible just like we do, yeah, but they follow after the wrong one in this same line of Abraham. Instead of Isaac, they think that Ishmael was the chosen one of God. And this is where they mess up. And this is where the Bible teaches us that from that line of Ishmael that he was a wild man, and that from him he makes up rules. And all, this is the father, this is the beginning of Islam as we know it. It says, as we look at Abraham and we see the lineage and you chase this down, it's really important that you do know the lineage. It's really important that you do understand that there is a pure way. You understand that this is something that God very specifically chose, very specifically draws it out. But there's also this, not just is faith the opposite of law-based religion, but we also find that faith predates the law also. It was actually before that. In the past couple of weeks, we saw how that Noah made the Faith Hall of Fame, and today we find another one who is in Hebrews chapter 11, Abraham. Well, how did they make it? They believed God. Listen to this. Galatians 3:17 says this, and this I say, that the covenant that was confirmed before of God in Christ, the law, which was 430 years after, cannot disannul that it should make the promise of none effect. In other words, God made this promise a long, long time before the law ever came, which is what men asked for. The chosen people of God, the Israelites, they wanted a king. They wanted the law. They asked for these things of God. So God gave them and knows that ultimately they're going to see, you know what, we had it right the first time. If you're born into this where that you are taught about faith in the beginning, if you are taught about faith in Jesus and in Him alone, not in our works but in His works, if you're taught about that, you are so blessed. Because it is so hard to get all that confusion out of people. But whenever we look at this, even before the law was, the promise of God was there. And as we go through the Old Testament, what we're going to see is how that people continually tried to make it about performance. Chapter 11, the first example of that, when the Tower of Babel came up and they thought that they were going to build a tower unto God, but God scattered that. Abram is not great because he had a great plan. He's not great because he did great works. He's not great because he figured out how to account his way to God's grace. You want to know why Abram is great? It's very simple. Same reason Noah was great. They believed God. Whenever the Bible says that they believed God, what it does not say is something that we know to be true because we live in this world. If it says that you believe God, then it must be an option to believe something else. What is the something else? The ways of the world. The things that make sense to you, the things that made sense to your fathers, the things that made sense in tradition, the things that made sense in religion that was pushed on to you. All that stuff was stuff you didn't ask for. You're going to have to choose to believe God. Even though it's set up, even though it is setting on a T, even though it has already been done, you still have to choose to believe God. And as we look at these pillars, as we look at these early examples, the thing that makes them great is simply because they chose to believe God. How many times, and I've even been this person for a while whenever I started hearing the gospel. I remember being in college, and it was really the first time that I really, as an adult or someone who could reason things out, someone who, whenever I was just listening, I had an Old Testament class and I had a New Testament class in college. Thank God for that. But I remember as they were teaching, as they were speaking about it, whenever I thought about it, I thought, well, you know, I believe this. How many times have you seen and heard people who claim to believe, but it doesn't affect them? See, Noah believed God, and he spent 100 years building on a boat. It affected his walk. Abram believed God, and it caused him to do something. Chapter 12, verse 1. Now the Lord had said unto Abram, Get thee out of thy country, and from thy kindred, and from thy father's house, unto a land that I will show thee. And I will make of thee a great nation, and I will bless thee, and I will make thy name great, and thou shalt be a blessing. And I will bless them that bless thee, and curse them that curses thee. And in In you all families of the earth shall be blessed. Just those first 3 or 4 verses of chapter 12, we start to see what is happening within the thought process, what is happening within Abraham. If you do a little bit of research, if you go back into it, just for time's sake, I'm going to tell you where to go find it. Go look in the previous chapter and you will find that Abraham was raised in a city called Ur. You're going to find that Abraham was raised in this place, that it was the most advanced civilization on the earth. You can find that up if you do any bit of digging in history or whatsoever. They were so smart. Remember, just before that, they were so smart that they started building a tower to reach God. That civilization, as they spread, they were still smart, but they started making advancements. They started doing things. And as they have dug up ruins of that city, they have found that the city that he was raised in was probably the most advanced civilization that there was on the face of the planet at that time. And the Bible tells us who his ancestors are. Terah was his father. And in those times, it wasn't just that they were smart in the way that they built things. They weren't just smart in the way that they had technological advancements, but they were smart in how that they approached God. Worldly smart, not spiritually smart. If you're spiritually smart whenever you approach God, you know what you're going to do? You're going to fall down. If I'm being honest, God, my works can never measure up to what you have already done. If I'm being honest, God, I will never be good enough to have what it is that you freely offer. If I'm being honest, God, I only have one move, and it is to worship and praise your name. But logically, in our minds, we think, kind of like the temptation that happened with that first man and woman that we looked at just a few weeks ago, Adam and Eve. Logically, in our minds, we think, I want to think like God. I want to be like God. I want to know the things God knows. And we start making advancements, and we start doing this, and we start doing that, and we think, I'm going to control things, and I'm going to gain power, and I'm going to do this. It leads to idolatry, and idolatry was one of the biggest problems that there were in Abraham's city, in the way that he grew up. As a matter of fact, in Joshua chapter 24, Joshua calls it to mention, he says, if you'll remember your ancestors, even the father of Abram, Terah, they were nothing but idol-worshiping heathen. That is the pedigree that we have from Abram. Abram did not make Hebrews chapter 11 because he came from a great family. Abram did not make Hebrews chapter 11 because his daddy gave him something, because he passed something on to him. Abram made Hebrews chapter 11 because he made a decision upon his own whenever God spoke to him, whenever God told him something. You'll find in those verses that he had no children, but his name was Exalted Father, and his people looked around. He had brothers, he had cousins, he had nephews, he had Lot, he had all these people that were around, and they were all producing children. Abram had no children, but he was the one who was still in line. He was the one who was the patriarch of the family. So all the pressure was to stay right there. All the pressure was to stay right there in Ur. But when God spoke to him, he said, you need to get out of there. You need to get out of there, and you need to leave your father. You need to leave the things that came from your father. Now the Lord said unto Abram, get thee out of thy country and from thy kindred and from thy father's house unto a land that I will show you. See, whenever it's time to claim whatever God says is yours, you will not be able to claim it by being still and trying not to lose what you currently have. See, whenever it comes to actually claiming the promise, you can read the promises of God all day long. I can preach them all day long. You can pull it up on TV. You can watch sermons all day long and hear what all the promises of God are. I've heard people try to number the promises of God. There's no way to get an accurate number of what all God promises in the Bible. He's got promises every day. He's got promises every minute. He's got promises every second that you're alive on earth. If you would just open your eyes, if we could just see how good that God is. He has fixed things before we ever knew to ask Him. They are there. Who sent you? I am. Just say I am. God absolutely is. And what He has done, He has done. Nobody's going to take that away. He doesn't have to take backwater. He doesn't have to apologize. He doesn't have to do anything. What He has done is perfect in every way. But we are not called to be fans of God. We're not called to just talk about how good God is. We're called to live a life that shows that we actually believe what He said. It's not about coming in church and just raising your hands, but then going out and living any way you want to. It's not about making it all about what you do either. We've already talked about that, right? There's got to be a balance. There's got to be a balance of the fact where we listen and we say, you know what? What did Noah do? Well, he did what God said do. Build a boat. Makes no sense. Never rained. Don't even know what a boat is. Don't know what rain is. What did he do for Abraham? Go. What did Abraham do? Abraham went where God said. What we find from the two covenant people in the early beginning of the book that we are supposed to know so well is that you do what God says do, and you go where God says go. I'm going to ask you to stand today. The promises of God are all there. You can read about them, and you can say, you know what, I'm going to get those promises. I'm going to do some fancy accounting. I'm going to make myself righteous with God so that I can have those promises. So you know what I'm going to do? I am going to clean myself up. I am going to start doing better. I'm going to start talking better. I'm going to perform. I mean, I am really, really going to perform. I'm going to act right. I'm going to act right. Here's the thing. Until you believe God, all of that performance, at best, you know what it'll get you? It'll get you a bunch of people looking at you and saying, wow, I really look up to you. You're so good. Listen to me. If your life is all about whether or not people approve of what you say and do, you're missing the greatest purpose that there is in life. You want to know what life is about? Going where God says go, doing what God says do. Let me tell you what that'll do. That will cause people to look at you like you are funny, because most don't. That lineage that we looked about, you know how quick we read over those names, we can't even pronounce them? They didn't really do anything notable. Not until this man popped up. What made him different? He believed what God said more than what the world said. God has made a bunch of promises, and if you actually want to lay claim on those promises, it will take faith. And through Abraham is the start of a whole line of people that God chose to live in covenant relationship with. What I'm trying to show you as you look at these first few verses of chapter 12 is that the promise is clear, but the location is not disclosed. And unfortunately, as we reason ourselves through this life, it's really hard to reason with God. About 19 years ago, 18, 19, however many years ago it was, God spoke to me and Gina, and we knew that we were going to have to leave where we were raised. Hardest thing I ever did in my life. I left my mom, my dad, my whole family. She left her whole family. When I read the story of Abraham, I can't help but testify to you that if you will go where God says go, the promise is sure. The promise is there. But because He loves us so much, He wants us to choose Him back. Guys, do you know that He chose you a long, long time ago? He chose you a long time ago. But there's some of you in this room right now, you really need to choose Him fully. Not because your dad does it, not because your grandpa does it, not because it's a family tradition. You need to come and grab a hold of God to make your life worth the living. As I look at this story and we just start to crack the book on it, you want to know what God's saying? Get up, get going, and I'll let you know when you get there. Which is a perfect place to stop a sermon and say, what's He telling you to do today? if He is drawing you, if He is speaking to your heart, and He is saying, come, can I tell you that that's probably the hardest, easiest one of them all? Because whenever we see Abram, we say, oh man, he was called to leave Ur. He was called to leave Mesopotamia. You know, that's modern day Iraq is where that is. He was called to leave that place. A place of comfort, a place where he was needed, a place where he was important. God said, I want you to go over here. I got to get you out of that mess, son. I am going to create something in you that will blow your mind. God is telling you to move today. Will you bow your heads? Nobody looking? I don't want you to think that necessarily it's a grand move. There might be somebody in this room right now, and if it's you and you know that you've been struggling with a great move in your life, I would love to hear your testimony. Come up and tell me about it today. But I'll tell you some more testimonies I'd like to hear today. Finally, today, preacher, I understood what that stirring in my heart was. I understood what that moving was about. I understood what that was of God choosing me out from amongst 8 billion people and making me special and making me the God of all creation. That feeling that you feel is Him dealing with you one-on-one. And He's asking you to move. Just come to me. Don't worry about where we're going. Just come to me today. I wonder how many of you in this house today would slip your hand up and say, God is definitely moving and speaking to me right now. Would you just slip your hand up? Bless you. Bless you. All right, look. I'm not going to draw this thing out. If God is moving up in the hearts of His people, we have one last song, one opportunity. Nobody's going to make this weird for you. I just told you that stirring that's in your heart, it's not me doing it. It's not anybody in this room that's doing it. It's God who's doing it. Come to God today. Nobody's going to make this weird for you. We want you to encounter and experience and hear from God today. If He is stirring within your heart, come find out what it is that He's stirring about. Come and talk to God today. We're going to pray.
Once again, we want to thank you for joining us online at our Sunday service here at the Crossing Church. Right now, in our sanctuary, we're taking up the weekly offering. This tithe to your church allows us to continue to grow our ministry and provide you with resources for your spiritual journey. You can give to the Crossing Church in 4 different ways: by mail, online website, our app, or even by texting an amount to 84321. We're honored that you have chosen to spend your Sunday morning with us and want you to know that there are pastors online in the comment section down below that are available to talk with you if you have a need or if you have anything on your heart that you would like to share with a member of the Crossing Church team. You can do that now, or you can also reach out to us online. You can use the online Connect card at our website or through the app. You can also contact us via phone at 865-932-3993. We hope that today's message blessed you, and may the Crossing continue to be a resource for you along your spiritual journey. The Crossing Church. Feet to go, hands that serve, eyes on Him.